I have been very fortunate to have been a part of New Zealand Christians in Science from the very beginning. I came across one of Nicola's book, a co-director of NZCIS, when I was doing my master's thesis on pain and suffering. And she mentioned this new organisation that they were starting. And honestly, there could not have been a better fit with what I was researching and the questions that were being raised in my mind. New Zealand Christians in Science is a really great community of people from all walks of life who are interested in the questions of science and faith. I honestly wish this organisation had been around when I first started university. I can imagine my story is quite typical of other people who were raised in quite a conservative backgrounds. I remember as a secondary student, whenever evolutionary theory was mentioned, the emphasis for me was very much on the theory. You know, it remains a theory for a reason. I'd been told that we were God's special creation. We were created in his form, so we were created as we are, and we most certainly did not have a history with the animals. And so that's kind of where it laid in my mind for a while. And thankfully, I've always loved debating and having challenging conversations, but I also strongly believe that our opinions need to be backed up by facts. So I decided then, actually, I'd better go and actually study evolution so that I can understand why I don't believe in it. And I can't actually remember the exact moment when everything changed, but I remember the feeling very clearly of just, wow, mind blown. It was, I think, in the very first semester, I was doing a paper on hominid history, and I was hooked. I was blown away by the absolute, richness and wonder of the history of the world. And alongside this, of course, a really large questions came to formulate in my mind, where my previous understanding of the world it couldn't accommodate what I was now learning. And so I found myself with this huge cognitive dissonance. I couldn't reconcile my previous worldview with this new one. I didn't know how to hold both my faith and now this new scientific view together. Hence why, looking back now, I really wish NZCIS was around during that time for me. And at this time, I was also doing a Bachelor of Philosophy. And so I was then again exposed to very different ways of seeing the world. And I remember sitting at home and feeling as though kind of, my entire foundation for how I saw the world had just been totally torn apart. And this was a really hard time. I remember going to my youth group leaders, with these questions, and their response also was, well, it's just a theory for a reason. It's not actually true. But I just remember seeing, wow, there's no engagement there. There's a real lack of knowledge, but also just the desire to engage. And for me, then that just shook things up. This is where I was going for truth, because I was now convinced on what I'd learned through science. So I knew, though, that I couldn't give up on my faith. I'm a pastor's child and a missionary's child, and I couldn't deny this goodness that I'd seen in my life. And so I remember thinking, okay, well, if the God of the Bible is true and what we are learning about the physical world through science is true, then they actually somehow must be able to fit together. So I'm just going to search for truth, and by virtue of it being true, when I discover it, I will find it. And I'm really grateful for the foundation that I was given as a child, because I think, God's goodness and allowed for a lot of grace as I kind of questioned and navigated my way through all this. I didn't fear that I was being heretical, or anything like that. I trusted in truth and goodness, and that eventually I would kind of be able to wade through all this. So when I met Nicola a while down the track, I was doing my master's thesis in theodicy. And I honestly had no intention of going down the science road that I did in this thesis. But when you start to ask questions, of pain and suffering, and you look at kind of the inherent nature of this by virtue of the way God created, then new questions sort of start to pop up, which led me down the road to look at our physical history and the way natural history, how the world was created. And so I realized, man, our lives are the way they are because of this physical creation and all that entails. We can't just kind of sidestep the reality of the world and the reality of the way God created. And yes, it does bring up some really tricky questions. But for me, this also really highlights the importance of the discussions we have at NZCIS. We can't compartmentalize our ways in the way that I used to. We are part of this good world that God created. Who God is and his plans are revealed in this world that he's created. And there's so much richness and there's so much wonder, but there's also some really hard realities which we need to grapple with. And this is why I really believe that New Zealand Christians in Science is not just for those in the sciences, but it's actually pivotal for all of us going through this journey, because these questions, they affect all of us. And I'm so pleased to be part of this amazing community as we navigate our way through all the complexities that we face.